Going to be discussing Judge Jones's decision in the Dover versus Kitzmiller court case in class. So I'm going to give you a real brief background into what the actual court case was and some of the things that happened during the trial. Dover is a fairly typical small town. It's actually only about an hour from here near York. And back in 2002, a couple of the school board members, Alan Bonsell and Bill Buckingham, decided that they would like to try to remove a lot of the teaching of evolution and try to input various religious explanations. Now, if you remember from the last video, the 1987 case in Edwards versus Aguillard said that you can't put in creationism because that's the equivalent of teaching religion and therefore not constitutional. So in this case, they started looking into using intelligent design instead. And in 2003, the Discovery Institute contacted the school board to discuss the use of ID in class. And in 2004, the Thomas More Law Center, which is a strongly Catholic, a very conservative law group, agreed to back the Dover school board in any court case that might arise from this because they knew that one would. About that time, 60 copies of the Wolf Pandas and People textbook appeared in the school library, donated to the school. And in 2004, a little bit later, the school board voted 6-3 to use that as their biology textbook and add a statement about evolutionary theories that had to be read in class. This caused the immediate resignation of 3 school board members, and multiple teachers refused to comply with the directive. And in 2004, December, 11 parents in the ACLU sued to prevent the use of text or reading of the statement. So the statement that they actually used was the following, and the Pennsylvania Academic Standards require students to learn all about Darwin's theories of evolution and eventually to take a standardized test of which evolution is a part. Because Darwin's theory is a theory, it is still being tested as new evidence is discovered. The theory is not a fact. Gaps in the theory exist for which there is no evidence, and a theory is defined as a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations. This is a really fascinating statement because it really muddies what a theory and a fact is in scientific context. They're completely right that it is a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations. Evolution meets that standard by having lots of evidence and uniting much of biology under its aegis. However, as I said, there are gaps in it, of course, because there are gaps in any scientific theory. The problem is that doesn't mean that something else is necessarily true. It means that we still have to go digging for a little bit more evidence. So, with all this set up, they went ahead and brought the case to a specific individual. This was not a jury trial. This was a judge before a judge, Judge John Jones, who is a district court judge in the center of Pennsylvania. He's a Republican who was appointed by George W. Bush, and interestingly, he's also a graduate and current board member of Dickinson College, although we'll forgive him for that for now. Now, the trial itself did not go very well for the Discovery Institute and the intelligent design proponents. The first problem was that 3 of the Discovery Institute fellows that they were going to have testify at the defense had to withdraw immediately since they were clear that Bonsell and Buckingham's motives were religious from the very beginning. And again, under Edwards versus Aguilar and the Lemon test, that means that they're going to lose the case no matter what. The best that they could do was a Lehigh professor, Michael Behe, who's one of the best known proponents of intelligent design, and testified for the defense. And during the defense portion of his talk, came up with the statement that there are no peer-reviewed articles by anyone advocating for intelligent design supported by pertinent experiments or calculations which provide detailed, rigorous accounts of how intelligent design of any biological system occurred. In other words, there's literally no evidence whatsoever for intelligent design. That's a statement by the defense, which is just insane. Finally, they discovered and entered into evidence what's called the Wedge document, which is an internal Discovery Institute document. Remember that the Discovery Institute claims to be nonpartisan, that they don't really care who the intelligent designer is, but they went back and redesigned their logo to explicitly remove the Judeo-Christian God from it. The Wedge document is very clear. It states that intelligent design's purpose is solely to act as a wedge to force religious explanations into public schools. So at this point, the case is basically over. There's no hope for them because it's very clear that this is going to violate Edwards versus Aguilar no matter what. However, it got worse for them. Specifically, they came up with a couple of notes from the 2 school board members most behind it. Bill Buckingham, during one of the school board meetings, he said, 2,000 years ago, somebody died on the cross. Won't somebody stand up for him? Again, this is not a good statement if you're trying to imply that you're going to try to put something in that is explicitly non-religious. Ditto Bonsell claimed on the witness stand under oath that he had no idea where the donated copies of Pandas and People came from. The only problem is multiple other people pointed out that he had explicitly asked for a donation from them from Buckingham's church. At that point, Jones came very close to charging Bonsell with perjury. He basically, told him that he was not going to listen to any more lies on the stand, and that if he did that again, he was going to be subject to a court case of his own. Finally, one of the most amusing bits was the textbook itself. It turns out that Of Pandas and People actually has evolved over time. And interestingly, it was an entirely another book back in 1983 when it was first written. It was a book entitled Creation Biology. And it has since gone through multiple revisions entitled Biology and Creation, Biologies and Origins. And suddenly in 1987, something miraculous happened. We watched a major shift from using words like creation and creationist to using design and intelligent design. If you remember back, you might recall something else that happened in 1987, which might make the use of the words creation and creationism rather problematic in a textbook. So suddenly these were removed, and the book was renamed Of Pandas and People, and thus suddenly became this wonderful textbook of intelligent design biology when it was never intended to be that in the first place. In fact, was a version of this beforehand which used the term creationists or creation. What they basically did is they did a search and replace job. The problem was that they were extraordinarily sloppy, and they had interesting errors in it. For example, in one of the cases, in the version in 1986, there was a statement, evolutionists think that the former is correct, creationists accept the latter view. This was then copied and replaced it with design proponents rather than creationists, but they didn't do it correctly, so they ended up with the bizarre word see design proponentists. Obviously, this was not what they intended to do and was poorly written. They just went ahead and did the fastest possible replace they could, because under Edwards versus Aguilar, clearly this wasn't going to fly anymore. So you're going to read portions of John Jones's decision in the case, which was much, much longer than what you're going to see. It's about 136 pages, actually. But it actually was a masterpiece of working through what exactly science and religion actually are and how they should be handled in the public sphere, which is one of the reasons that it's one of the more interesting court cases of the last few decades.